incentives. And everyone realizes now, they recognize that in order to build a really high quality solution in health AI, you have to bring people from diverse group of stakeholders together, clinicians. And it's not just clinicians, and everyone thinks it's just clinicians and engineers. But that's not the only people involved. There's people in administration. There could be a health economist. There could be research experts. There could be somebody from pharmacy or somebody from pharma, all coming together to build a product, but also to integrate it into a workflow in a way that doesn't become a massive interrupt inside healthcare. And one thing that keeps on coming up is they might have different motivations. They may have different limitations. They may have different constraints. They may have different goals and starts to these projects. And I know you have a lot of experience with this, Johannes. I wonder if you could speak to that. How do you get the why out of everybody?
Yeah, so that's the thing, right? Like, you'd have to understand sort of first that not everyone's in it for the same thing. Basically what you said, right? Like, even like when you say like there's a clinician, and that's not even the same clinician, right? That could be the clinician on the AI side, that could be the clinician on the developer side, that could be the clinician in the clinic, that could be the ringleader essentially in the clinic that sort of tries to lead this on. And all of them obviously try to do different things. And we're not even talking about like the engineers specifically and the administration, the people that actually end up paying for these things, the IT people. Like, there's a ton of different backgrounds in this. And obviously you've alluded to it, right? Like, all of them have I'm not going to call them competing incentives, but it's sort of good to understand that not all of them have the same incentives, right? There is some that really will look towards, I'm going to say, business outcomes, right? That sort of need to look at the financial gains of it. There's some that are going to look at the fluffy term of patient outcomes and sort of what that would mean, right? And sort of trying to optimize for sort of that ideal experience. There's some that are going to look into the differentiation. There's some that are going to look at the accuracy of the model and the publicability, I don't know if that's a word, of the sort of findings that you have, right? And all of that is, I'm going to say, it's actually not that difficult to draw out the why once you understood that there is a different why for everyone, right? Like, you can go into all of these vision exercises. You can know what the solutions sort of want to do, but you will need to understand who has a personal vested interest in the solution, who has a economic interest or financial gain from the solution, who really has sort of a reputational benefit, and who just wants to do it for the sake of doing it, right? Because these will be different sort of mindsets, right? So every time someone tells you, yeah, like I usually like to use that quote, right? Like, when two people are talking, there's usually like there's 6 different things that they're discussing. It's like, one is what the one person says, one what they think they're saying, and then what the other person's actually hearing. So that's just 2 people. So you can envision that all of these obviously are even broader than that. So again, I'm going to say it's not that difficult to draw out once you get into the nuances. Usually I would hope that you get into a project that is where you have enough trust base and you sort of have this very open dialogue internally so that it is enabled to have that conversation. Once you have that established, you just need to understand there's different incentives, and then you just need to talk about them openly, right? And you need to sort of apply that filter to anything anyone is putting in order to better understand sort of that third voice of what you're actually hearing.
Thank you, Johannes. And I'm wondering, Pavodi, if we, I think people who want to make let everyone send messages, can people put questions in the chat? If you haven't, don't wait for a Q&A to start. By the way, everybody.
So, one of the question I have on this part of it is, because I have been in the enterprise sales motion where normally they don't have this kind of regulatory, restriction, but there has been continuous movement towards within the healthcare to utilize these kind of technology and AI and different part of it. How do you see? I know you said there are so many different people can be influenced and all that. For companies and people like that, who would be the first one or the easiest one to access to start having the conversation? What do you think?
My standard answer would be the first one who wants to talk to you. It's usually a good one.
Good sales answer, you know.
No, so I mean, so that's the same thing, right? Like it goes towards the incentives of basically what we just said, right? Like you need to, ideally you want to get to sort of that champion, that sort of person that likes to push things forward, right? Because that's the space that you're in essentially with the innovation piece. So you're trying to get to that champion. Now that champion might not be the person that actually responds to you, because usually that champion tends to be relatively busy. So you need to find out anyone who could be connected to that champion. People will guide you in that direction, right? Like usually you describe what you do, you have an open conversation with anyone in, you know, the hospital, the health system, the pharma company, the medtech company, and people will guide you in the right direction. And I think that's then sort of the easiest entry point from that angle. And I'm gonna say I've had these conversations, and I after quite some years, I cannot give you an optimal answer for which one would be the best. Honestly, I've had companies where, to your point from just now, like with the regular, like I've had people from the regulatory side that guided me towards the right people. I've people from procurement, from the commercial space, from like actual clinicians, anywhere, right? Like anyone can be a good source if they want to talk to you. And then you have to navigate that a little bit. But again, same thing with the incentive, right?
I think you said it right there, because I think, how do you build the trust with someone, whoever it is? It's a human network connection. Yeah. How do you make that first level of trust and connection and become, another thing I talk about is become advocate, you know, give them something. Don't always ask for what in it for me, versus understand their part and tell them, these are the things happening in industries and the trends and all that, you know. So you're right. Absolutely. You had to find whoever will listen to you. But when you go into that, you want to have a good conversation. You're on mute again.
Have your hands for a few more minutes. I want to ask, do we have any do you have any follow-up questions, Ruben? Sorry, I've been very distracted with the audience. I don't really have a follow-up question myself.
I've been that's what we are discussing on the who are the main part of it, and if you look at the regulatory part, do you see a difference between US and Europe market? Anything different you can see how people can work towards on those kind of area?
I mean, that's a difficult question, depending on specifically who you're going. I think both of them are sort of moving it forward relatively, for regulatory bodies, relatively fast, I'm going to say. A little bit different directions, obviously. A little bit more on the freer side, a little bit more on the state side, but a little bit more controlled, more compliant, maybe on the EU side. I think both of them sort of work hand in hand. I'm going to say what the regulatory agencies themselves, I think, put forward interesting concepts. What for me is more important typically is the interpretation of those rules and the interpretation of those guidances, because they tend to be very individual, and that's where the culture for me tends to come in a lot more. So, right, like even though people could be reading the same regulation, I'm going to say in the US, typically there is more of a risk-taking approach than I'm going to say in Europe. I mean, that applies across the globe. That's a very nuanced difference. So, because again, I think it's more individuals interpreting that. So it's actually for me more exciting to see if you have anyone that's a little bit more innovative on the regulatory or legal side, and tries to push the boundaries. It goes back to what I said before, right? Like in these teams, a lot of times these functions tend to be seen as roadblocks, or these intuitions, and it often helps to just understand sort of what you're signing off on and what the responsibilities are. And once you've figured that out to some extent, it's very easy to get into a constructive co-creation mode, specifically on these regulations, if that helps.
I like the word you use, the co-creation, rather than coming from the silos. I think we talked about today's session is about silos and different parts, but the co-creation, how do you collaborate? How do you make sure what we are saying and what we are doing, how they are going to help them? Yeah. And those kind of thing, absolutely, is very interesting.
Thank you so much. We got to let Johannes go now. Thank you so much for coming, Johannes.
I'll stick around. Don't worry.
Yeah.
Oh, you're still
I'll-
staying. I thought you were going to leave. Okay.
Okay.
Now we bring on our next speaker, and Sigrid. Sigrid, and a lot of people may know Sigrid because she has the best infographics in health AI, and I've always I'm a big. You also may have seen her on my LinkedIn feed because I'm always reposting her, and I'm wondering if we can spotlight Sigrid so everyone can see her and hear her.
If I need to speak, then that comes up.
Hello, Sigrid.
Hi, hi. Thank you for the kind words, Jose.
Oh, you're welcome. And the I was really, I thought you'd be really good to bring on near the beginning because I want to talk about, and I think a lot of this is about facilitation, communication, and I know you're really, really good at that. And I wonder, but before we actually get into it, I wonder if you could talk about, we could, and the reason why I'm asking you this question is when we had a webinar last month, and a nurse practitioner said to me, Jose, that webinar was brilliant, but it felt like you people weren't speaking to me or to people like us. We are, we're a big part of healthcare, the biggest workforce in healthcare. They're also the keepers of like millions or thousands, I don't know how many, little workarounds that aren't necessarily in the org chart. And they're kind of they don't feel like they're part of the conversation. And just they're kind of come on at the end as a tester to validate. And I'm wondering if you could speak to that now, is how can you, first of all, why should people care what nurses think? And how should they get them involved?
Yeah, good question. First of all, I might be a bit biased because my mom's a nurse, so I'm biased there. But I think if you look at like healthcare, the healthcare system, what you just said, like the biggest workforce are the nurses. They are everywhere. They are, if you need to get something into healthcare, whether it's just for yourself having a treatment or getting a new treatment or medical device or whatever it is, out there, you need to have nurses on board. It's like, I don't know, like obviously, like if you go to the GP, the doctor is the first one you'd see. So maybe people like as a patient, you think, oh, but it's just a doctor. But healthcare is so much bigger than that. So if you have say a new mayor or a new president or whatever, but you can't get the people along with you, and I'm considering like the whole people, like the whole force are the nurses. So you can't just like, okay, as say that the doctor was the president or like the one that we kind of consider important because the first line of contact often for patients. You're excluding such a big group, and they know what's happening on the floor. They know how the processes work. They know the struggles that are there. And if you're working with implementing whatever it is in healthcare, and you cannot get the nurses along, well, the project's going to fail because eventually the nurses are going to be impacted by that work. And I think I hear the same thing that you say now, Jose. If I've been to conferences like health tech conferences, and it's like, well, one of the key issues that's come up there is whether there are any healthcare professionals in the room. That's often excluded in these health tech conferences. But then if you look at if there are any health professionals there, they're mainly doctors. And I'm always confused about this because the nurses need to be there as well. They need to they will, as Johannes just said, like the champion, they could be the champion. You do have a force of champions, not just one. You have a force of people doing that. But also, if you're if you're developing something and you want the nurses eventually to use it, you might even or if you're forgetting the nurses, you're forgetting that the nurses actually are the ones who would be using it, and you're just asking for the doctor's opinion about this. Well, then you're excluding a very, very big group who's going to be using it, and your project honestly is going to fail, I think. And yeah, they will be able to give you early insights on how to improve that tool that you're making. They'll be able to give you such good insights as well. And as the thing is as well, like when you talk about healthcare and you have, well, if you only talk to the doctor, well, they're just going to give you insights from one perspective. Yeah. And the nurses have different perspectives. They're the ones who are talking to the patients, seeing their needs. They know the work flows, the processes. I know my mom always, like, she came home after her work as well as a nurse, and she would, like, sometimes, like, she would have a young doctor coming in. It's like, I could do the work because she's worked there so long. She knows the ins and outs of the hospital system, of the patient care as well. So you shouldn't exclude them as an important stakeholder, because I think they're one of the crucial stakeholders. And I've done the mistake myself, like with some of my talks and posts, and kind of like focusing on the doctors. And I've done that mistake myself. And it's like, and then people talk to me later. It's like, yeah, but like the nurses, like why are you forgetting it? And I don't understand why people, like, I'm doing it, other people are doing it. When you talk about developments in healthcare, you often consider from a health tech perspective, you consider the doctor, and that is a big mistake.
Actually, that is a great point. When you look at it, how do you ignore a big percentage of these people? And so to follow up onto that, one of the fear of this technology and AI for everybody who are in the nursing kind of thing, they think, oh, they are going to be replaced and these tools are going to take over and all of those part of it. So if you want to have some of these kind of conversation with nurses, as what you're saying, how would you suggest approaching them? And I have some thoughts on that, but I would like to hear from you on how would you go first, befriend them, and second one is, how do you get to them to appreciate this technology is going to not replace them,
And you mean trust the system, or what?
Yeah, how do they want to trust to, we are talking about bringing technology into their day-to-day life, yeah? Yeah.
Well, how will they ever trust the system or the new tool if they have never been consulted in the development phase? First of all, how would you trust something if it would be as a nurse, if it would be as something else, if someone was to tell me as a patient, for example, me as a patient, they want to sell me a tool. If they've never been a patient in my situation, if they've never talked to patients in my situation, why would I trust them knowing what I need? So you need to talk to the ones who actually know what they need before you start developing something. How many times, I don't know how many people of the audience as well have talked to medtech companies, or been sold to by medtech companies, or maybe working in a medtech company, or whatever. It doesn't even need to be medtech, just a company, so with had a sales conversation. And I've experienced so many times that people are just talking to me and pitching their idea, and they have never asked me a question before they start pitching their idea. They haven't even just asked a decent question, like, where are you from? And it's just getting this trust, like you talked about trust just now, but it's also for to understand what are the struggles, what are the pain points, what are the issues that are happening. And so if you don't get that right, well, then I'm not going to trust you as a salesperson. I'm not going to trust you as whatever person you are. If you think you have a solution for me, you don't even know if I have a problem. So you have to understand that. And you also need to understand, like, in order for nurses to trust a system, yeah, so involve them in the development phase. You obviously can't involve every nurse in the world. There are too many nurses to involve, also meaning, again, they're a big group. But involving nurses in the development process. And then another big part of trust is literacy. So bringing a new technology, new tool, if they don't understand what this tool is, they don't understand the implications, they don't understand how it works as well, they're not going to trust it. So I think and that's also what I'm working a lot on as well, is helping people, organizations understand what AI is, how it can be used, whether it's AI it can be used for it, but this is like what I'm doing, and how it can be used and what implications it can have, but also understanding the ethical implications, because I think that's a big worry for nurses as well, because they work so close to patients. I think they also very often have to make ethical considerations during the day. So if another tool is going to replace them like this, well, then their alarm bells are going to come up, and rightly so, because there are ethical considerations with new tools. And yeah, you need to talk about those issues and those challenges and the questions they have, because if you ignore those challenges, if you ignore any type of doubt they have about a tool, a product, whatever, if you don't talk about those, you can never solve that either. And I think talking about those issues, well, then you come to next level of trust. Can also just, yeah.
Go ahead. And I mean, I don't know, there's an excellent point of, trusting part of it. And one of the other observation I have seen is most of these nurses are overworked already, and giving another tool which they are not familiar with, that really puts them, as well as thinking. And how, by talking to them, as you said, understanding their workflow, understanding their part, how this can, integrate. Like if you look at one of the AI technology at SenseMate we develop is voice to, AI conversion and those kind of part of it. Because by doing that, they don't have to, they can just speak to it. It will dictate it. It will provide some feedback. It doesn't replace them, but it gives them as another eye and another listening ear, and give them more additional information, while they still have to be the human to human connection.
Yeah. And I think that's what you just said, that the human to human interaction. So developing tools that would actually take away part of the admin work or the tedious work that nurses are doing, so that they can focus on the human to human contact. Because I know, well, I also have a healthcare background, but not as a nurse. But when I went into healthcare, and that's nursing, I think that there's a lot of professions in healthcare. They went into it because of the human side of it. They didn't go into healthcare so they could sit behind a computer.
Yeah. You're
Jose,
muted. You're mute.
Hello. Let's see, we have. Thank you so much, Sigrid.
Thank you.
And we're going to bring on Conjali.
Hello. Good afternoon. Hi, Ruben. Hi, Jose.
Hi, once again. Thank you for joining us again.
At the last event, he's a doctor by background. She worked in digital transformation in London for several organizations. And you've seen her she speaks at a lot of events. Thank you so much for coming again, Conjali.
My pleasure.
And I know you're on the other side of the fence. You're in healthcare, and you are actually, and I know you're dealing with a lot of startups in health AI that are coming to you either to sell you their services, or or you've already gone past that into a pilot or some kind of partnership. Now, I know a lot of these health AI solutions, they'll go into a pilot before they're fully implemented in the organization. So I wonder if you could speak to that part of the collaboration. Once we get past the initial stages,
Yep.
Hopefully people have listened to Johannes and Sigrid, and we've passed all those teething problems, and we're in the pilot and everything's running smoothly.
Indeed. I'm very happy to pick up from there, Jose.
Yeah.
So your warm tact, you've translated it into a pilot, and success, relax, it's all done. Well, I'm here to tell you, absolutely not. This is where the real work starts. So a trap that I often see that people can fall into is you're focusing on the tech, right? And actually the organization is focusing on the problem. And what does that mean in practice? It means they are focused on the outcome, right? And either your tech is or isn't going to deliver that outcome. So you, as the vendor, also need to focus with them on the outcome. So sometimes that even looks like helping them define the problem. How do you help them define the problem? And to do that, you actually need to take stock of what kind of organization is this? Is this a large organization? Is there a lot of infrastructure and support? And that can lead to its own challenges and also advantages, because you will have resources to call upon. But you will also need to ensure those resources know how to interact with one another. Perhaps this is a smaller organization, and in fact, they will not even necessarily know that they can lean on you more heavily as the vendor to help them through achieving the outcome. So really the tech is not the focus. It's so easy to fall into the trap of making the tech the focus. And why wouldn't it be? You've developed this beautiful piece of art, and the natural belief becomes that that's the focus. It does this, it does that. That doesn't matter to the organization. They have a problem, they have a certain outcome they need to deliver. That needs to be defined in the outset, and also the roads to success. So how are we going to measure that we are achieving those outcomes with you and for you, helping them also set realistic targets. So you might not, as you start that pilot, you really don't want to overpromise and underdeliver or be seen to do that. You want to manage those expectations, right? You have they have a gargantuan problem. You help them break that down into stepwise achievable outcomes that you can prove you are achieving with them. That is really, I think, one of the central pieces to this, although I can continue on in terms of other avenues to explore in this area.
Please continue on, Anjali. We've got
Okay. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned it, Jose, already, that I'm a physician by background, and sometimes rather in healthcare, these projects can be run by clinicians like us. And I've led on projects a number of times in various organizations, and they've looked so different from one another. And our team has looked so different. So you as the vendor, you really want to do your due diligence in terms of who are the decision makers in this project? Are they clinicians? If they are, they might not understand the intricacies of the build and why it is a certain way, or even the hard stops that you have in your solution. They might not understand that. You might need to do a bit of work with them around that, a bit of educating around that, or ask them to call upon technical support around that. Conversely, you might be in an organization or in a project that is hugely IT-led. So they might not necessarily recognize the clinical pitfalls, where if you don't encourage them to, as to Sigrid's point, involve stakeholders like nurses, physiotherapists, doctors, clinicians on the ground, it doesn't matter how well they've designed this piece of software with you. It won't get adopted. You won't be able to prove that you have achieved those outcomes that you've defined from the beginning. So that's another really key piece as well.
That's an excellent point of even looking at the organization. This one applies to the enterprise sales. In the model, you go and talk to your customer or your purchaser and talk to them. But understanding the buyers, users, the next level, who are they going and working with? Like we talked about with Ingrid about the nursing part of it, or other people who are using it, or the patients. So having that eye on that, who is the users of your technology at the second level, that helps a lot of information to gather and even educate. One of the area which I had seen in enterprises is most of the buyers, they don't understand all the technology and all the different part of it, because they are also just like us, not in the trenches. They are just buying things and it was given to them. But going and then educating them, this particular product versus another product or another approach, why this one is superior to them. And when they go inside the room, when the decisions are made, they will present it. People will ask question, why are you choosing this? By educating these people of how the users will use, then they can, you can help them articulate. Yeah.
Absolutely, Ruben. I mean, to expand on that, it's an excellent point, the education point, because once they're in the pilot, what infrastructure do you have to support them? What educational tools and materials can they use within your ecosystem, where they can upskill their project, they can upskill their end users using that potentially? If you provide that whole library, that wealth of infrastructure, when you come on board, you're really then starting to develop that relationship. You're bringing something with you beyond the tech. That could even look like a network of end users. So the experience that you have with successful post-pilot, fully implemented cases, you might have developed a network of those individuals that you're saying, welcome to the family. Join this is the resource that's available to you once you get through this stage. Basically, you're providing a lot more than this beautiful piece of tech that you ultimately will be providing as well.
And then, the continuous theme for many of the tech people here is that your tech is important, tech is great, can improve all that. If you don't have that connection to the users, connection to the customers, you will have a lot more hard time selling them than it is. I think it is
ultimately, Ruben, it's still humans implementing this stuff, at least for now. So it comes back down to that, right? Like, how can you make that organization, that project's life a little bit easier when you provide them with something more than just, oh, my piece of tech is better than that person's piece of tech, and please just keep the pilot and we'll make it cheaper for you. It's not always about cheaper, because people sometimes don't mind paying a bit more for something that provides continuous support. There's this support, there's that support, there's network. So I'm with you on that, and I think that's a really key piece around this, at least for now, until robots take our job. So
I can go so much deep into it. I've been talking to a VC about this robot, and in China, actually, it seems to be because of the population and all that, they are using a lot of those, and that would be the topic on another session.
We like to collect new topics during our webinars, so you're quite right.
I think the healthcare delivery system. Yeah, the healthcare delivery system. Sigrid talked about the nursing and all that. I think we may even have a full session on how to enhance that delivery and collaborating. Maybe that could be a later session.
Absolutely.
Everybody, just so we're going to have an after party. If you don't know about it, we're going to put the link to the after party in the chat. It's a Zoom session where everyone's cameras and microphones are going to be on. And we're going to be going more into a Q&A. Everyone will get a chance to speak in the after party. Akanjali, thank you so much.
And Jose likes parties. Let me put it that way.
Stories. I can tell you stories, but I won't. If we can bring on.
Jose, can I make a comment?
Oh, yeah, go ahead, Panos.
So I want to tie together what Sigrid said earlier on and what Akanjali kind of shared just now. And most of the time, we always talk about workflow, right? And it's just such an overused word. I mean, we've been using the word workflow for ages. And most of the time, what companies will do is they will take kind of a certain segment of the workflow and try to identify a solution and apply a technology solution. The challenge is that you could have the best solution ever, an ideal technology. It doesn't equate to outcomes, right? An ideal technology, the best solution ever that you can deploy, it does not equate to patient outcomes, right? I'll give you an example. You might have a technology that uses AI to triage stroke patients in an emergency department, right? The stroke patient, the outcome for that stroke patient does not start when the technology takes over. It starts from the time that you call emergency services, right? The time that the ambulance shows up, picks up that patient, the time that they go through the front door and they check in through the front desk, right? And guess what? I mean, to Sigrid's point, if there is that nurse that takes 20 minutes to perform a task, you could, save as much time as you want in the end of that workflow with the triaging, with the identification, with, moving the patient through. But it might be that certain individual, that certain section of that workflow, that the outcome, basically does not go the way you want it to go. So it is so critical. And I'm not saying that, you need to boil the ocean, because, you have to involve everybody. But you need to take a look at kind of the specifics of the workflow that you're trying to address from your own technology perspective. But then you need to step back and take a look at the bigger picture and see kind of who has an impact to the actual outcomes, whether it is clinical outcomes or it can be operational outcomes. So I just wanted to make that distinction. Many times we just confuse good technology, good solution with outcomes. So that's not the case.
Okay, we're going to bring Thanos back. But can we bring on Claude? Thanos, don't go away.
Okay.
Hi, Hussein, and everybody else. Thank you for sharing your thoughts so far. Very insightful. I like the human-tech combination. I think it's very important to consider every AI system that's being designed with empathy from the offset. I think it goes down to what Johannes was saying, understanding the why and connecting the why are we doing this? How is this adding value to a nurse? How is this adding value to a specialist? We know that our doctors are burdened. We know that they don't have enough time to spend with patients. They may have 10 minutes to spend with a patient and 2 questions to ask. That's the patient asking them 2 questions. So we have to really ask, what value can any system bring? So my experience sits beyond pilotitis. Pilotitis is a real disease in tech. We all love doing pilots, and they all go to the same graveyard, especially in AI. So my experience and the team that I work with is specifically on scaling beyond that stage, looking at what can we learn from what worked. How do you add fuel on that fire to really help move from just one practice, one trust, one hospital to 2,500. And we are looking specifically at taking stories, as Sigrid was saying, right? You want to involve the nurse, but you can't involve the nurse in every hospital. That's impossible. It's unrealistic. So we have to say, by design, we have to validate in a certain number of hospitals, and saying, how do we bring such a story from a nurse? This is the impact it had on my daily practice. This is the impact it had on my daily workflow, and scaling it to X number of clinics and actually adding value in terms of revenue saved, time saved, effort saved. And the bottom line should be, is it impacting the patient? Is it impacting the doctor? So I really love what Johannes was saying. I think everything we do should start with the why. We shouldn't just create tech for the sake of something cool. And I hear this again and again. We have something special. We have something different. And they're awesome. A lot of these tech players are bringing really amazing tools in the market. But do they solve a real problem that exists right now? Some hospitals still use CSVs to upload the data. Most hospitals, the data is siloed and not integrated. So the quality of an AI can't be scaled beyond a specific environment. We have to really look into those real challenges. That's my perspective there.
No, I think that's very interesting, Claude. If you look at that path, if I take a little bit further step on this, where would people go about finding, I mean, yes, talking to nurse, talking to doctors, that is a very good way. But as you said, there is going to be limited sample size and all that. Are there any like publications or conferences or collaboration on the internet where they can find good data of a real problem and where things are? What do you think? How people can go about making sure they are solving something real rather than they perceive to be real, you know?
This is where Ruben and I have a different view to what was expressed earlier in the call. I don't think that you should speak to everybody. I actually think you should be exceptionally intentional. You should be very specific and respectful of the other person's time. So you should ask, how is this how is this solution solving a real problem? And go to a trust. Go to a trust, ask them, what are the challenges of the patients that you represent? How can we solve a problem in cancer care, in oncology? How can we solve a problem in cardiovascular disease? And ask that trust to work with you, to help you solve that problem. And you'll find some amazing people. And they will say, sure, let's use a number of hospitals, 2-3 hospitals, start small, and then scale from there. I've seen in my experience that work really well. And once you have a real case study, Ruben, you can then go to the next stage of scalability. And scalability should be done in partnership with the real big players in the market. Otherwise, they will crush you like a little bug.
It's very true. I'm going to throw a question came from the audience while we are continues to do that. One big one is, are patients ready for robotic or robot doctors, robot nurses, etc., etc.? Are they uneasy, or is someone can take that and say, how do you guys, because you guys are in the front line, how do you see people going to that extreme of robotic surgeries to things?
Is it an extreme though? Is it not a real need? Because this is not on whether it's coming. It is there already. It's actually in most places that maybe you don't look at them as a robot. Maybe you look at them as a piece of software, but they're actually extremely intelligent. They are there. There's countries that are more advanced. So I think robot doctors are there. Robot nurses are there to a certain degree. They may not look like RoboCop, but they may be much smarter than the definition that we had back in the days. So that's my view then.
Absolutely. I mean, I see, because I didn't want to put my thing, because I'm living in Silicon Valley. There are many of the venture approach, what you said, absolutely true. Surgery, helping, just monitoring through vision and helping surgery robotically, as well as continuously monitoring and providing feedback to the doctor as added eyes and ears and giving that one.
Mm.
Okay.
Yeah, the Da Vinci robot is a good example, right? I mean, Da Vinci, has been out there being in endovascular interventions for 20 years now. And what Da Vinci does is it removes the doctor, from the patient. And there is no limitation to where you can put that console. You can put that console across the world, and you can operate on that patient remotely. So the robotic surgeries that are being done today, there is was an effort by Siemens to develop a neurointerventional robot that can do remote procedures. So there is a lot of these efforts out there.
May I add just a thought that, Thanos? Personally, I avoid the language around replacement. I think replacement risk is a real risk in the ecosystem. It really, doctors don't react well to that. Nobody reacts well to that. We look at optimization benefit. So optimization benefit is around time for doctors. How much time do they spend doing a job? How complicated is it? How tired is a doctor after 5 hours of working in an 11-hour shift? And how inefficient they may become, not because they're not good, just because naturally you get tired. So then we look at optimizational benefit of supporting them. In the same way as a glove warms you up when you hold it, doesn't mean that your skin is not good enough. It's just you might need another layer. So I think we should definitely position with that element.
Jose, you want to take the Thanos? I think we are getting close to the time.
Thanos, you have any final words?
Oh, many words. Only final.
And
I know,
specifically,
spend some time. Yes.
pass the pilot.
I'll kind of quickly try to bring things together, and I see kind of collaborations in terms of partnerships company to company, but also collaborations between companies and hospitals, providers. So reality is technology alone does not transform care. Collaboration does. And the real challenge today, and that came up from the discussion here, is not building kind of better models in AI. Is really building the better partnerships kind of that they last, and going beyond the pilots, beyond the press releases, and making impact. I say there is kind of very quickly, I would say like 5 elements. You need to align on a shared purpose, not just the product. And that came up earlier in the conversation. You need to have committed shared mission. You cannot be about product, cannot be about technology. I mean, this kind of aligning on a shared purpose helps sustain the momentum. I think the next one, trust is a big one. We talked a little bit about earlier about how do you need to interact with individuals. You need to be transparent. You need to be authentic. And at the same time, there is a shared risk that you need to be willing to take, right? So, trust is not built in a contract. It's not an agreement. You cannot, put legal language around it. And that goes around people. You need to align with culture. So that's a big one. And willingness to co-invest, share data responsibly, embrace risk. The third one, I would say embed AI into the clinical and operational workflows. AI cannot live in a silo. I mean, that's what the AI is. It is multimodal. It learns. It basically helps with, has the opportunity to break the silos down. So success, kind of again, repeating to what was said earlier. Engaging clinicians, engaging staff early, respecting their time, delivering tools that they help deliver better outcomes. Fourth one, create a kind of a strong governance and feedback framework. You cannot have long-term collaborations that succeed without having clear governance. Define roles, decision-making structures, and really feedback loops. How do you learn out of that collaboration? You cannot, again, collaboration cannot live in a press release you issue today and then tomorrow you go ahead and do something else. And continuously iterating, it is critical. And the last one I would say is, commitment to outcomes and not to the outputs. Don't measure success by the number of deployments, dashboards, really measuring it with the real clinical and financial outcomes, aligning incentives around mutual value, between the collaborating parties. So I think these are kind of the 5 ones that I would come as I was kind of listening here and I was kind of taking note of the comments. Over what I've learned, if I've learned one thing over the years, the successful kind of collaborations, they don't happen by chance. They build with intention. There is a purpose to them, and you need to be grounded on trust. You need to address real world needs, and then measure the outcomes. And that's kind of what is critical. And when we kind of move beyond the silos, beyond teams, institutions, even mindsets, you bring people together. Everybody has their own mindset, their own belief system. This is where you can unlock the full potential. So I think this is where you can start seeing kind of true transformation, and everything needs to come together.
Yeah, I think you pulled most of the thing together, and we have great questions. 4 or 5 of them come through. So what we would suggest is for all of you to hang around for after party to get into most of those questions. They were talking about what is the AI technology, how, what is the killer app, where are the voice AI coming in, so many of these different areas of technology and people are interested in. I think we'll have a lot more deeper conversation on that. But one of the interesting point came out of all of that is we talked about silos. There are so many silos in the hospital or the medical system, and which we have to work together. Our, intentionally, Jose made our headline today to be, how do you breaking through those silos? I mean, that is the conversation we are having here, from Sigrid talking about nurses and Claude talking about how do you go and convince different people and how you apply these technology and all that. As a final thought, before going into the after party, anything our audience can take away on the breaking the silos beyond what we talked about, who do we talk and all that? Anything any one of the panelists would like to add?
I'll make a quick comment, Ruben, in
Please.
terms of, I think Diana made a great point, which is a practical tips when it comes to people, because those silos hinge upon people, right? And so it's really taking the time to listen and do your due diligence. So those silos probably exist in the organization in which you've implemented your pilot. So find out, how long have they been there? What do they know about the organization? That's one end of the spectrum, where they might be new to the organization. So there's so much that they need to know and learn about the structure of that setup. On the other end of the spectrum, somebody might have been there 20 years and not been on board with some of the changes made in other parts of the organization that don't come to light until your piece of tech is implemented. And ultimately, it hinges on you to get these two different extremes to work together. And I think the practical takeaway that I would take, or I've seen work, is getting them to map it out, talk to each other, plan or actually look at what their as-is processes are right now, take stock of those, and then exactly how your tech is going to influence that. And when you get them to do that, you really start to break those silos.
Yeah, if I may add to the second dimension to what you described, beyond people, we have a real silo around technology. There's Epic, Oracle. These are real silos in healthcare. You cannot go about building anything without that reality. So I personally would urge you to consider real partnerships that add value strategically to your growth. Without such partnerships, any people part will stay within a segment. So we have to take a two-dimensional approach of people and existing tech stacks. Secondly is explainability around black box AI. As we talk about AI, a lot of questions in this chat are around, is Gen AI going to be rolled out? Let's be very frank on this. Black box AI, which is not explainable, is very challenging for doctors. So we have to design with explainability in mind, otherwise it will fail.
Thank you. And I think we are closing out our main session. We are going to go to, I see some of the hands raised. Please stay with us. And you can, we are preparing. Jose is already jumped into going into the Zoom meeting for the after party. And most of us will be there to answer and intimately talk to you about that. But while we are closing, I want to, again, close out with our sponsor, SenseMate, which is an AI IoT company, which has been in the industry for 12 years, building various AI, ML, and IoT. Because the important part of it is not just the technology from the software point of view. There are hardware component, physical component to it, and SenseMate has been able to develop more than 20 plus various technology in this area. As part of the perks for attending this session, they are offering like 3 months MVP development, so free and pro bono. So they will be working with if you have a problem, and as earlier talked about, please talk to a nurse or please talk to a doctor and get some validation of your idea, and then come and say, I want to develop this technology and by it, putting that technology together. And when you go back to tell them that I have a solution, I can show you an MVP, and then your credibility increases. So please reach out to us. There are many of our business development people are available here, as well as on LinkedIn. You can follow up with us. We will offer pro bono, building your MVP, and based on that, we can talk about long-term partnership. And there are other people in the audience and who are looking to even deploy some of these ideas. We have so many different solutions available from SenseMate, the medtech area. So that is where we will start. So thank you everybody for attending this session. And as we are going to be joining the Zoom party or after party, and where most of us will be around and to answer additional questions and collaborate and just learn from each other.
Thank you.
Thanks.
See you.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye.